becomes a fact, becomes a truth, even if it really isn't either of those things during the process. But if he wins tonight, he goes toe-to-toe with Trevor Lawrence, and I get it, people, it's not him versus Trevor Lawrence, but you understand what I'm getting at. If Justin Fields can beat a team quarterbacked by Trevor Lawrence and then can do it again in a couple of weeks, probably led by Mac Jones playing Alabama, then I think Justin Fields has a chance to potentially play his way back into the number 2 overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft. Now, I don't think that if he loses tonight, he falls to the second round or something, but I don't think that he's going to land as a rock-solid, no doubt about it, top 3 prospect as we begin the pre-draft process. I know Justin Fields, his focus tonight is singular. It's on Clemson. And I understand that Ohio State's focus is singular. It's on Clemson. But for those of us that don't have to worry just about Clemson, there's a trickle-down impact here tonight. I think there's a chance for Justin Fields to really sort of cement his status as the number 2 quarterback behind Trevor Lawrence, because recent buzz and recent momentum has swung towards Zach Wilson of BYU, who obviously you know well. I mean, this is a player who's been really, really good, but he does not have an opportunity to play tonight against not just a really good team, but a Trevor Lawrence-led team. So a lot of pressure on Justin Fields, but I wonder this, and I don't know if you've weighed in on this previously, but Ohio State's played just 6 games this year, obviously one of the other major themes. Like, is it possible that, like, they haven't gelled yet because 6 games isn't that much time on the field?
Well, I think it's incredibly possible, and then you look at what COVID has done to that team. They haven't been 100%, in a long time. So you can look at all those factors and say, okay, that would contribute to what we're seeing from Justin Fields. But will guys at the next level care that much? Because at the end of the day, you're a quarterback at the next level. You're going to deal with these situations. There will be injuries. There will be guys unavailable. Look at Carson Wentz and all the injuries he's had to deal with. Nobody cares. You're supposed to make it happen. Like, that's why you pay quarterbacks $40 million a year. And I think if Justin Fields comes into this game and he doesn't show up and he throws more picks and he doesn't prove that he's the playmaker that you're going to have to be if you're going to lead a bad team going forward, I think that will tremendously, to your point, affect his draft stock, and it should. Zach Wilson can ball, and that dude has a great chance to be the next quarterback picked after Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, and I get it. Zach Wilson hasn't had the same number of games as Justin Fields, but he's played really well in a couple of notable moments. So a lot at stake here for Justin Fields and the Ohio State Buckeyes. That's Straight Talk Wireless. No contract, no compromise. And a reminder that both college football playoff semifinal games are on ESPN and ESPN Radio. Coverage on ESPN Radio starts at 3 p.m. We're just getting started here. We have all kinds of college football talk for the next couple of hours. And coming up, how does Ohio State slow down Trevor Lawrence and this high-powered Clemson offense? It's the Dan Batard Show with Field Yates and Myron Medcalf on ESPN Radio.
From Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin.
He's a quarterback. They all sensitive. How many times I got to say this to you?
Right into Greeny with Mike Greenberg.
Dak Prescott right this minute has more leverage than any football player ever has at any given time.
Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin at 6 Eastern, followed by Greeny at 10 Eastern. Coming Tuesday to ESPN Radio.
And finally, the shortest, most concise tongue twister is toy boat. Try saying that 5 times fast. Toy boat, toy boy, toy boy, toy boat, toy boat.
He came closer than I did. Toy boy, toy boy.
Stugats.
Everybody, let's go around the room. Chris, what do you got? What do you got? Give us 5 straight toy boats. Say it as fast as you can.
Toy boat, toy boat, toy boat, toy boat, toy boat.
This is the Dan Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
It is the Dan Batard Show with Stugats on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, Sirius XM Channel 80, and ESPN Plus, presented by Progressive Insurance. Field Yates and Myron Medcalf hanging out with you for the next couple of hours here on ESPN Radio. Happy New Year to everybody out there listening to us right now. And it is time for us to bring in some reinforcements, specifically some college football knowledge, as ESPN college football analyst Barrett Jones joins us on the Goodyear Hotline. Goodyear, helping you discover the road ahead. Goodyear, more driven. And Myron, I wanted to share a fun fact about Barrett Jones that I learned earlier this week. I still think he's underrated, but there was a recent release of the top 100 players under Nick Saban during his tenure at Alabama. Barrett came in at number 5 I feel bad for the 4 people ahead of him because they were erroneously ranked behind the man who was all over the field, the most reliable offensive lineman Nick Saban has likely coached during his time at Alabama. And, oh, by the way, he's going to be on the ESPN radio call for the Sugar Bowl today here. So, Barrett, thanks for joining us here. Happy New Year, my friend. And as we get into this game, it's finally here. It's finally here. What are sort of the keys to this game today that you are keeping the closest eye on just hours away from kickoff?
Well, Phil, first of all, could you stop it, man?
No, I will never stop.
This article.
You have the right to not be part of this show. You can say no. You can ignore our producers, and you chose not to.
I understand. I get it. No, first of all, it is the greatest day of the college football year. It's finally here. I'm so jacked up about just this entire day. I'm jacked up to call a game in person, too. I got to be honest. I'm in New Orleans, assuming I pass my COVID test 2 hours before the game, which I still am not sure what the plan is if I don't. Then I'll actually get to be in a stadium this year, which is going to be awesome. I was just actually rewatching the highlights from the game last year and remembering what an incredible game this Clemson-Ohio State game was a year ago. And I came up with 2 things that I think are going to be interesting today that really rang true in the game a year ago, and that's Trevor Lawrence's legs. He rushed for 107 yards. That's really when they're at their best, is when he is awesome with his legs. He had 90 yards in the game against Notre Dame a week and a half ago. And then the other thing is Travis Etienne and his receiving ability. 524 yards, leads all FBS running backs in receptions and yardage. I think those could be 2 key differences tonight for Clemson. And then the other side, it's got to be about the run game. I mean, 141 yards in the first quarter a year ago for J.K. Dobbins. He banged up his ankle. I really think they're going to have to get the running game established with Trey Sermon. That's their best chance to compete against Clemson tonight.
Barrett, I think a lot of us are going to be watching Justin Fields right away to see if he can be effective. I mean, is this one of those games where we'll know pretty early how it's going to play out going forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. I certainly think a lot's riding on this game for Justin Fields. And, he has played maybe not always his best football in big moments. And that's a knock on him. I think that, people know about, and I'm sure he knows about it and hears it and wants to go out there and prove people wrong. Is the thumb right? We'll see. I think we'll see on that early. But ultimately, look, Justin Fields, he's a competitor. He does make big plays. Again, I was just rewatching the game. Got the football back with a minute 49 to go a year ago, down 6, drove it all the way down to the 23-yard line, and he threw a late pick. And I think he remembers that. So I think this is what's been driving him all season to get back to this moment. So I wouldn't count him out just yet. Now, I am excited to see. Look, Ohio State, one of the most balanced teams in the entire country, the only team in the country, FBS team in the country that's averaging 250 yards a game on the ground and through the air. I do think they'll be run first. That's their best way to do it, and that's when Justin Fields is most comfortable off play action. But I'm excited to watch him tonight. Now, I think he will have to make some big-time plays with his arm if they want to win the game.
Yeah, and we've been talking about this so far on the show, Barrett. Like, how much pressure is on Justin Fields specifically? Because it's not that as he goes, so goes Ohio State. They've won 2 games this year where he wasn't at his best, but this is about taking the team to a different level. And then, as Myron and I were talking about, while Ohio State's not mentioning this right now, there's a lot at stake for him for his NFL future as well. He's got to show out in a big game.
No, you're exactly right. And look, you're right. They have won a few games where he hasn't been at his best, but this is Clemson, right? This is not, with all due respect to Indiana and the season they had, this isn't Indiana or Northwestern. Right? I mean, this is Clemson. They are they're clicking on all cylinders right now. They're much more battle tested. Yeah, that's all the talk coming in, including from Dabo Sweeney, is all about how Ohio State only played 6 games. It's an advantage. I see it as the total opposite. I see it as a disadvantage. I mean, this is a team that's not fully battle tested yet, and Ryan Day will be the first one to tell you that. Think about this: they've played 6 games this year. This will be Clemson's 4th top 10 matchup, right, of the year. So they've been in these games this year. They know what they've got. They've battled adversity a little bit. Obviously, lost a game to Notre Dame, so they've had some more experience this year. I think that's going to be huge. Justin Fields will absolutely have to be awesome tonight if they want to win. They have to be clicking on all cylinders. Because, again, this Clemson team right now, I'm telling you, they're peaking at the right time as they usually do and playing at a high level. And it's going to take the running game, yes, but also Justin Fields is going to have to play awesome and make some big-time plays down the stretch.
Barrett, which team has the coaching advantage?
Ooh, that's a tough one right there, especially because, Tony Elliott, the offensive coordinator, is not there. I think that could be a factor. That's going to be really interesting to see the way they manage that. And if the play calling looks odd at all. I think, look, they both have incredible staffs. I mean, it's hard to pick between them. I think Brent Venables defensively is one of the most brilliant minds out there with the way he just changes up his packages. He's so unpredictable. That's the chess match I'm most looking forward to tonight is the Brent Venables defense against that Ryan Day-led offense. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch. So I'm gonna not answer your question and just make another point like all great analysts do.
I was going to say that was the pivot of a lifetime right there by Barrett Jones. So I know there are some people that when they call the game, they'd rather not offer up a prediction. But so let's just maybe give you this question. What's the avenue for Clemson to win? And then what's the avenue for Ohio State to win tonight?
Well, I guess I mean, if I want to be Herbie someday, I guess I need to, pull a Herbie and say, I'm calling this game, so I can't pick it. That's what the pros do. But no, I think, first of all, I mean, the avenue for Clemson to win, I think is just to stop Ohio State's run game. I think if they stop Ohio State's run game, look, they're going to score points. I mean, this offense is very dynamic. You have ETN, obviously, and Trevor Lawrence playing at a high level. So they got to start. I think they've scored 34 points in every game this year. I don't know if they'll score 34, but they're going to score points tonight. So that's not going to be an issue. They're going to have to stop the run game, and if they do that, I think they will win. That's why they're favored, obviously. On the other side, Ohio State has to run the football well, yes, but Justin Fields is going to have to be awesome. He's going to have to go out there and make some dynamic plays, possibly with his legs, a play that is just off script. When you play defenses like Clemson, you're not going to have guys running wide open. There's not going to be a whole lot of mental errors. You're going to have to go up and make a competitive play in crunch time, and that's what Ryan Day talked about. I talked to him yesterday. He said, look, we want another chance like we had last year, get the ball in the fourth quarter with a chance to win the game. That's what they're hoping for. And so will Justin Fields be special in that time? Will he be special? Will he be awesome? Kind of Heisman-like level like he was a year ago? We'll find out tonight.
We sure will. It's Barrett Jones, our ESPN college football analyst. He'll be on the radio call for the Sugar Bowl. Enjoy the game, Barrett. Thanks for the insight. And the next time you come on, I promise I will remind everybody that you were, in fact, the fifth best player during Nick Saban's time here at Alabama.
Just remember, I was ranked ahead of Amari Cooper. That should tell you all you need to know about that list.
That's right. That's right.
No, and just to clarify, I am saying that's the joke. Amari Cooper is twice the player I ever was, and there's about 10 other guys on the list like that. So, anyway, I'm just honored to be in your company field.
Barrett,
if there was an ESPN
you just stop
host list, you would be top 5.
You just stop it. You know what we need to do is I heard Amari is willing to offer you his 2021 base salary to move up to the 5th slot at Alabama Lawyer. So you guys can work on that negotiation. And everybody wins in the end on that. Great stuff, Barrett. Enjoy the game tonight, man.
Thanks, Field.
Yeah, the college football playoff is here. And kick off your day with the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. And stay tuned for the college football semifinals. The Rose Bowl game, presented by Capital One, followed by the All-State Sugar Bowl. Coverage begins today at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. How about that? On ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Field Yates and Myron Rolle. Wow. Myron, we have... In a moment, there, right? We'll be talking to another Rolle just a minute from right now. But how much of a blow is losing David Bakhtiari to the Packers' title hopes? It's the Batard Show with Field Yates and Myron Medcalf and someone who has a last name Rolle coming up here soon on ESPN Radio.
Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin.
Zeke can't get going. The quarterback's gone. I think they need to retool the offensive line before they address the Ezekiel Elliott situation.
Followed by Greeny with Mike Greenberg.
I've got bad news for you in Ann Arbor. If it's not going to work with him, it's not going to work.
Your all-new ESPN Radio morning. Key J and Z at 6 Eastern. Followed by Greeny at 10 Eastern. Tuesday on ESPN Radio.
Don Batard.
Dr. Phil was a middle linebacker for Tulsa. That's not true.
Come on, please. Please tell me
that can't be true. Guillermo,
say it is.
Guillermo, put it on the poll. Did you know that Dr. Phil was a middle linebacker for Tulsa?
Stugats.
What are you doing? You're offsides. Now that's encroachment. Are there any other football terms?
This is the Don Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
It is the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, SiriusXM Channel 80, and ESPN Plus. All guests appear via the Goodyear hotline. It's Field Yates and Myron Medcalf hanging out with you this morning. Happy New Year to you and yours. We've turned the page to 2021, and ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Drivers who save with Progressive save over $750 on average. Myron, last night news broke that David Bakhtiari, the Packers' all-pro left tackle, had suffered a knee injury in practice that Rob Demoski, our ESPN NFL Nation Packers reporter, reports is likely to cost him the rest of the season. We always talk about how, well, I should say we, but the narrative is always that Aaron Rodgers doesn't have a first-round wide receiver. The team bypassed a wide receiver in the first round this past year to take a quarterback to eventually replace Aaron Rodgers. But how much of a blow is losing David Bakhtiari to this Packers title chances? Because he might be the best left tackle going right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a major loss, even though they had to work around some injuries earlier this year with him when he had the broken ribs. But that's the last thing you want to see going into a postseason like this. I'm glad he got his money. He signed that 4-year, $103 million deal in November. But this is not the kind of thing you want to see if you're the Packers. Because to me, Phil, this feels like Aaron Rodgers' last chance to go after a Super Bowl. And I know he could have good seasons going forward, but this is that opportunity. You're the best team in the NFC. Kansas City looks good, but not invincible. It feels like this has to be the year where you make the run. Losing a guy like that only makes that path more difficult.
Hey, the Packers told us just how big of a deal it is. As you noted, they paid him $103.5 million 6 weeks ago, the most ever to an offensive lineman. It's time for us to head out to the Goodyear hotline and continue this conversation with former NFL defensive back Antrel Rolle. And Antrel, we were just talking about David Bakhtiari, the Packers left tackle, who has suffered a knee injury. It's going to cost him the rest of this year. Can the Packers overcome this and continue on their Super Bowl quest?
That's going to be a big obstacle to overcome. You know, they pay him the big bucks for a reason.
Okay, maybe we don't have Antrel as of yet.
He's there.
Hello?
Antrel is there. No, we got you, Antrel. You were saying this is going to be a big loss, you're saying, for the Green Bay Packers going forward.
Yes, I was saying this is going to be a huge loss for them. Obviously, that's going to be a big task to overcome, being that that's Aaron Rodgers' security blanket. You know, they paid big guy the big bucks for a big reason. And, you know, to not have him there, you know, a lot of times quarterbacks, they need that security blanket. You know, a lot of times when they don't have that, that's when they start appearing to seeing ghosts. But Aaron Rodgers, you know, he's an elusive guy. He's a guy who's a dual threat. And if anyone can overcome it, it will be him.
Antrel, I mean, you have a situation where this feels like, even though we've seen Tom Brady, even though we've seen Drew Brees and these guys sort of make these late runs, I mean, how much of this feels like Aaron Rodgers, if he's going to get that second Super Bowl, it kind of has to happen now?
Well, you know, the Super Bowl is one of the hardest tasks I've ever been able to achieve in my career. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to be able to reach it 2 times, lost one, won one. But that's not something that can just appear out of nowhere. So when you have that window, when your time is now, you have to make sure you capitalize on that opportunity, because that margin for error is very slim to none. And you almost have to be perfect. Not perfect as in not making any mistakes, but you have to be perfect as far as to win out, because now is when football starts. It's a brand new season for everyone. Doesn't matter what you did prior to. It's the best man may win. And the team that gels together and has the best camaraderie, the best chemistry, will be the team that advances. It's not always the best, you know, the most talented team. It's the team that knows how to play together, knows the ins and outs of each other in their games and their strengths and weaknesses, and the team that stands together in times of difficulty. Those are the teams that you see advance throughout the playoffs, because we see year in and year out the best team, you know, may lose first round, second round. You know, I was a product of that.
Antrel Rolle, former NFL defensive back, joining us now on the Le Batard Show with Stugotz on ESPN Radio. News broke yesterday that Ryan Fitzpatrick had tested positive for COVID-19. Not even the Dolphins' starting quarterback, but he has been sort of the Mariano Rivera for them, closing big games. How much of a blow is this for the Dolphins, who have a win and in scenario on Sunday against the Bills to make the playoffs?
Oh, that's a huge blow for them. You know, Ryan Fitzmagic, as they say, you know, he's been closing game as you mentioned, And, I think it can be a positive and negative. A positive maybe for Tua, knowing that if he doesn't have that pressure always steaming down his back. Some players can live with that and can adjust to it. Some players cannot. And being that Tua, obviously, he's a rookie. And Fitzpatrick has had to come in and save a couple games for the Dolphins this year. But being that they need this game to get into the postseason, that's going to be a tough blow. Depending if the Bills want to play out, the Bills also need to play out. So it's not like they're going to rest their guys, and it's going to be up to Tua to go out there and get the job done. He's not going to have anyone to come in and save the game for him. But that's where defense comes into play. That's where your other guys have to come into play, and they all can't rely on Tua. It's a collective team effort.
In a game like this, and you talk about Tua being a young quarterback who's trying to figure it out in this situation. You look at a Carson Wentz, what's happening in Philly. How do you restore the confidence in a situation like that?
Well, first and foremost, they have to want to restore the confidence. I'm not sure which angle they're going in right now. Carson Wentz, we all know that he has the tools, but he has underperformed. If it's not battling injuries, this year has been a underperforming year for him without a doubt. So I think, within the organization, they pay him big bucks. They renewed him. He signed his second contract. So it's going to be decision-making time. Do you want to, blow that money or give him another shot and see if he can redeem himself? And sometimes they can. But sometimes, like I say, it's going to be tough times never last. Tough people do. And if he's a guy that can bounce back from there and turn to the Carson Wentz of old, without the injuries, then we know that he can go out there and get a job done because we've seen him do it before.
I'll get you out on this, Antrel. You're not just a Super Bowl champion, you're also a BCS national champion during your time there at Miami. So who you got tonight in the two college football playoff semifinal games, Alabama, Notre Dame, and, of course, Clemson, Ohio State to wrap it up?
I definitely have to go with Alabama. I have to go with Alabama over Notre Dame. I don't see that being I don't see Notre Dame upsetting Alabama at all. I just think Saban has a plan. He's always had a plan. And if it's not a serious headhunter going at him, I see Saban taking that battle. I don't see anyone beating Clemson either. I think Clemson, with Trevor Lawrence back there, I think they're unstoppable this year. And I think that he's exemplified that throughout the course of the season, throughout the course of his career there at Clemson. And, I think it's going to be a battle. It's going to be a battle, but I do see Clemson taking that one for sure.
Clemson, Alabama, chapter, 92 could be coming our way. That according to Antrel, Rolle. We appreciate you joining us here in the Batard Show on ESPN Radio. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you also.
All righty. Hey, coming up here on the Batard Show on ESPN Radio, does college football have an identity crisis? It's Field Yates and Myron Medcalf, and that's next on the Batard Show on ESPN Radio.
Greeny is coming to your mornings.
Yes, it is frustrating. It's frustrating for all of us watching it. And you know whose fault it is? It's yours.
Greeny with Mike Greenberg, moving to 10 a.m. Eastern, immediately following Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin. Tuesday on ESPN Radio.
Dan Le Batard.
They've been around since 1896.
Oh, get out your wallet.
That's why I was getting the money ready.
Stugats.
I don't think Stugat should be fined for that.
Great, money back in the pocket.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
Is the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugats on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, Sirius XM Channel 80, and ESPN Plus. It is Field Yates and Myron Medcalf hanging out with you here on January 1st, 2021. That feels good just to say. And a reminder that ESPN Radio has you covered for bowl game action. Tune in tomorrow for the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl, followed by the Capital One Orange Bowl. Coverage begins at 3 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Myron, I was just thinking about this. I don't know if this would violate some sort of NCAA protocols or whatever, but You know how elusive PS5 is. That people are doing some crazy things to go out there and get themselves a PS5. Does every player in the Fiesta Bowl get a PS5 tomorrow? If not, we riot. If not, we riot. We riot.
Yeah. I think you do. And then here's where the violation comes. You can't sell it.
Ooh,
right?
There's the violation.
So you get it.
If you sell it, you could make some serious dough off of that, right? You could make a ton of money. All right, so last night, or I guess yesterday afternoon / evening, we had a bowl game between Tulsa and Mississippi State. Tulsa at that point, 24th ranked team in the country, 6-2 record during the season. Good season for them. Mississippi State 3-7 after that really impressive win against LSU to open the year. We all thought maybe this would be the year that Mike Leach and his offense in its first year just takes off and takes the SEC by storm. Well, this game ended ugly. It was really ugly. I don't even know if people know who won the game. Mississippi State won the game 28-26, but this was the Armed Forces Bowl in Fort Worth, Texas. And for those that may have missed it, at the end of the game, an all-out brawl ensued on the field. And I think we have the sound of how it may have actually heard during the play-by-play broadcast.
The good thing is, after all the chippiness, that these guys, wait a minute, now we're seeing a little bit of jawing and some issues with Martin, with Wheat. And now here we go. Jaden Muskrat and Tyrus Wheat are starting to shove each other, and you don't need that, guys. Just get off the field. And here comes Zach Hansen, the offensive line coach. He is coming out and trying to get in between Dante Bivens and Tyrus Wheat. Wheat had a big interception in the game. And now we have some pushing and shoving again. Hold your temper. Oh, now they are going to get into a fight. This is so unfortunate as the two teams are going to go at it. Goodness gracious. They are all over the place and throwing haymaker punches. What a very disappointing way to end the game.
So, Myron, ugly, disgusting. I mean, it's just a terrible way for that game to end because it was a very competitive game. Mississippi State pulled the upset 28-26. Here's what got me thinking about is that right now, prior to tonight's games, what has been the most notable bowl game moment so far this year?
Probably last night. I mean, probably the fight. I mean, that's what people are talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of defines the bowl season, right? And kind of what's happening.
And I think that's where I wanted to get. Like, does college football have an identity crisis? And what I mean by that is we all wanted the BCS to expand. We wanted more than two teams to have a right at the end of the year to compete for a national championship. But has this 4-team playoff, as presently constructed, devalued other bowl games so much that if you don't make the playoffs, like, that's all that really matters. And the reason why that's so important is, while things were a little bit different this year, think about a team that's in a Power 5 conference. Like, if you slip up, like if, for example, you are Auburn and Oregon and you play the opening game of the season last year and you lose that game, like, right away, your season may have been compromised. You're going to have to basically win 11 or 12 straight games to have any shot whatsoever of making the college football playoff. It feels like, you and I growing up, like we were talking about this before the show began, like the value of, you had Wisconsin ties, I had Columbus, Ohio ties, like going to the Rose Bowl and playing on the, the granddaddy of them all, even if it wasn't the national championship game, meant so much. Has college football become too dependent on the college football playoff or bust?
It feels that way, and credit to Learfield Sports for that play-by-play. I'll say this quickly. I don't know why people fight with helmets on. Like, I don't understand that. Who wins that fight ultimately? You're punching a dude who has a helmet on. But, yeah, I mean, the NCAA tournament doesn't have opt-outs. You want to know why? Because all of those teams have a chance to win. And I think college football is dealing with the situation where more and more guys are saying, you know what, is it really worth it? And Field, when you see a guy like De'Aaron King go down in a bowl game and you see situations like that, it's only going to encourage more and more of that. This is why I think college football has to take a hard look at expansion. Expansion has nothing to do with beating Alabama and Clemson. You're not going to find teams that consistently beat those teams. You can't beat the Patriots in the 2000s. You're not going to beat the Yankees. You're not going to beat these powerhouse teams year after year. But you can make it more interesting 3 through 8. And I think college football has to make a big decision in the coming years about what it wants to be, because the playoff matters a lot, and more these other games are kind of losing their luster, if you will, because I don't think this generation, Field, cares as much about the pageantry and tradition.
They don't. I mean, again, it just doesn't. They just don't right now. And I am not disputing players' rights or their decision to opt out of bowl games, but 15 years ago, that never happened. Now, for example, North Carolina has 4 players who opted out of their huge game against Texas A&M. But we are focused still on the college football playoff, and the question is, how does Notre Dame slow down the high-powered Alabama offense? It's the Dan Le Batard Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Stream your favorite sports, stories, and series with ESPN Plus, Disney Plus, and Hulu. Get all three for just $12.99 a month.
Let's play the sound of Taylor Twellman speaking on behalf. Taylor Twellman, excuse me. He's an ESPN analyst who I thought was going to roundhouse kick Matt Brados during the middle of this.
Max.
Mother.
That's a fine.
Mother bleep.
Stugats.
Sorry, man.
Mother. Yeah, you're sorry.
That's an easy one.
You're sorry.
What'd you call him?
Sorry.
I'm not. What'd you call him?
Joe Brados. He was sitting there next to Tyler Twellman. Let's go to the sound.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
It is the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugats on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, Sirius XM Channel 80, and ESPN Plus. Field Yates and Myron Medcalf hanging out with you on this day, the first day of 2021. There are a lot of things, Myron, I'm going to miss about the Le Batard Show, but the rejoins, they're up there. I mean, how are you supposed to, as a fill-in host, keep your composure when you've got Joe Brados and Tyler Twellman? I mean, it's just tremendous in many, many ways. All right, so we got the college football playoff starting up tonight. Of course, we've got the college football semifinals beginning at 4 p.m. Notre Dame, Alabama. All the pressure seems to be on Notre Dame. We were having this conversation before we rejoined here ourselves. Is what goes through Nick Saban's mind right now? You know, and I know the answer is like he's laser focused on whatever challenges Ian Book and Notre Dame present. But do you think that there's a part of Nick Saban's mind, like maybe stored away in like far left cranium or whatever, that's like, this is like my 10th playoff. Like, at some point, is this just diminishing returns for him?
Yeah, he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that sort of, relishes in the moment and really enjoys kind of everything that's happening. He's looking at this game and this game only, which is key to his success. As for us, I think it'll be a lot like Michael Jordan. We won't really reflect and respect what he's done until the 30 for 30 is done, until there's a series on Nick Saban on ESPN 10, 15 years from now. And then we'll look at how great this is. But in terms of adjusting to a new era of college football and just doing it at multiple schools, this is the greatest coaching job we've seen in college football, and one of the greatest period. So I don't think he's thinking about the future or legacy, but we won't appreciate this for a long time.
You don't know what you got till it's gone, right? I mean, it's a saying, it's a cliche. I would say cliches exist for a reason, right? Because while they're not always true, in many cases they can be true, and that would certainly be one of the examples. Yeah, Saban's part of one of those, that group of people that you don't totally, fully appreciate, even if you appreciate them immensely. He's also one of those people that's wired by the next one, right? So, like, the minute he wins his next national championship, he'll be working towards the subsequent national championship. So, Notre Dame, as we've been talking about, is a decided underdog here today. So, we'd both be surprised, very surprised, shocked, stunned if Notre Dame pulls the upset today. Is there a satisfactory result that you could see today from Notre Dame that makes you say, all right, that justifies the College Football Playoff Committee's decision to put them in? Like, if this was Texas A&M, what kind of shot would you be giving them to hang with Alabama today? Any? None? Notre Dame level shot?
I don't think it would be 20. I think it'd be a little less than that. But I don't know if you're going to find anybody that can compete with this Alabama team that is averaging about 500 yards per game, almost 50 points per game. You're not going to find anybody to be competitive if that's a one-touchdown game. But if Notre Dame makes it competitive and they stay within 10, and it's a competitive 10, it's not like they scored a bunch of garbage touchdowns down the stretch, I think people will give them more respect. I just don't see how that happens. Like, I don't see anything short of a beatdown and a game at halftime where I'm like, okay, what else do I have to do around the house? I'll keep this on in the background, but this game's already over, Field.
Yeah, and you're probably right, is that it doesn't matter who's playing today, right? It doesn't matter who Alabama is playing today. If it's not Clemson or maybe Ohio State, like, they're decided favorites in this game. Maybe not 20.5-point favorites, but they are decided favorites. And you would think that Alabama's going to take care of business against anybody they play in the college football playoff semifinal. The only reason why I mentioned the margin of victory today is that there have been other years where there have been blowouts, right? I mean, Joe Burrow in the first half of last year's college football playoff semifinal had, 7 touchdown passes. Remember that game? No way that was just a year ago, but I suppose it actually was. There was a year when Michigan State played Alabama, and Alabama just tossed them around like that was a junior varsity team. But it didn't feel like there was a need to prove the committee right in those years, like there feels like there's a need to prove the committee right this year. And I know that a lot of things were different this year, but obviously Notre Dame getting shellacked by, 24 points in the ACC championship game, a margin that was really closer to 31 because they tacked on a late touchdown in that game. It just feels like there's more at stake in this college football playoff semifinal between Alabama and Notre Dame beyond just who wins. I do believe there is something to be said for a competitive game to justify it. Otherwise, it's going to further amplify the discussion surrounding expansion of the college football playoffs, something that you and I have discussed on this show already, and I believe both of us would advocate for. And whether it's 8 teams, whether it's more than that, there may not necessarily be a perfect sweet spot number, but the bottom line is that I think where fans get more up in arms, and deservedly so, fans and fan bases and followers of college football playoff, is not just the non-competitive games in the playoff itself. It's the idea of who else could have been in there. But the case, the case for Texas A&M or Cincinnati to be the 4th is that's stronger than the case would have been for, let's say they had an 8-team college football playoff. The 9th and 10th and 11th teams, their case is weaker, right? Because the further you are away from the number 1 ranked team in the country, the more likely you are to find flawed resumes, multiple losses, maybe a single loss, but a really bad loss, whatever it might be. I just think that tonight could sort of kickstart the conversation that we have every year about college football playoff expansion.
Yeah, and if the expansion talk is about can somebody beat Alabama, then we should end it. Let's not have that conversation at all, because you're not going to find a team to beat Alabama. You're not going to beat the Patriots in the 2000s. You're not going to beat the great dynasties we've had throughout sports. That's not what expansion's about. It's about, can you make 3 through 8 more interesting? Field, I'm a 90s wrestling fan, right? And my favorite event was the Royal Rumble. I knew Bob Backlund and the Nasty Boys and the Bushwhackers and all these teams were not going to win the Royal Rumble. I understood that they were going to give that championship to a star or a star in the making. But it was interesting because you had so many people who had a chance. And that, to me, is what college football has to create and would create with expansion. We know that Coastal Carolina ain't winning it all, but I'd love to see them try. And I'd love to make this more intriguing. And then what you have is a Notre Dame that has to win a game or two to get to this point, instead of everybody's assuming that they're just going to get destroyed by this Alabama team.
Yeah, and by the way, R.I.P. Brody Lee, speaking of wrestling fans out there. But, it's not a perfect analog between the college football playoff and the NCAA tournament. But let me ask you, what do you do when the 1/16 matchup is taking place in March Madness every year? You watch the game, right? You're locked in. And obviously there's only been one at UMBC, but still, every year you watch the game because it's part of the process. It just feels like, not that Alabama hasn't earned every one of their titles, because in some cases we didn't even need a playoff to know that they were leaps and bounds better than every other team. But we've had some drama. We still have had some drama, like Cardell Jones, 12 gauge, and Ohio State. They pulled some drama that no one expected them to pull. So there is at least a small sample size that suggests expansion would be good. And there's a lot of common sense that suggests that expansion could be very good for the college football playoff. We'll see what Notre Dame has in store tonight, Myron. I'm going to freaking screw up.
It's okay,
by
man.
the end of the show. By the end of the show, I'm going to be calling you a Medcalf Rolle. Yeah. It just every time I turn, I'm just altering a last name, a first letter of the first name.
It happens,
I don't know
man.
who you are. No, it doesn't happen. This is just bad. It's very 2020 of me to throw a mispronounced name in there. So Notre Dame and Alabama kick off the slate of action, by the way, 4 p.m. Eastern time today, and then Ohio State and Clemson, a 7-point favorite at 8 Eastern, both games available both on ESPN and ESPN Radio. So it's not just the college football action that's taking place right now. It's also the NFL season rolling along into Week 17. And how crucial is Ryan Fitzpatrick's absence to the Dolphins' playoff hopes? It's the Dan Le Batard Show with Myron Metcalf and Yield Fates on ESPN Radio.
Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin.
Nobody would ever admit it was about the money, but clearly, without you even saying anything, you have admitted it's about the money.
Followed by Greeny with Mike Greenberg.
Get out of Tom Brady's way and let him take you where he naturally belongs.
Your all-new ESPN Radio Morning. Key, J, and Z at 6 Eastern. Followed by Greeny at 10 Eastern. Beginning Tuesday on ESPN Radio.
No.
Stugats.
To the wall.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
It is the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugats on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, Sirius XM Channel 80, and on ESPN Plus. We are presented by Progressive Insurance, and all guests appear via the Goodyear Hotline. Field Yates and Myron Medcalf hanging out with you for the next 45 minutes. We get you ready for a day full of college football playoff action. However, we still have an NFL season that's taking place. And here's just sort of a general thought. How many teams' backup quarterbacks testing positive for COVID-19 would register as a major breaking news story other than the Miami Dolphins, Myron?
That's it.
That's it,
that's
right?
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one. That's the only one we care about.
It speaks to how unique this is for the Dolphins with Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think the question, though, is how much does this matter, right? Because while Fitz has been pulled into relief duty on 2 separate occasions to spell Tua, it's only 2. I mean, they have also had a lot of games where Tua has gone wire to wire. Is the reason why this matters so much because we believe the Dolphins are going to have their hands full just to win on Sunday against the Buffalo Bills?
I think that's a huge part. I mean, the Buffalo plays its starters. That's going to be a difficult game, not just for them, for anybody. But I also think it's because of what Brian Flores has said. He said that Fitzpatrick was like a relief pitcher for him. And bringing him into these games, that's kind of how he views him. So if that's the perspective of your head coach, what does this mean for Tua? I know Tua's saying all the right things. But if my head coach is saying, yeah, we got this guy on standby because he can close the show for us, I don't know how that helps my confidence. So maybe if you're Tua, you're like, okay, let me prove to everybody that I'm the guy. But if they lose Field and he struggles and there's no Fitz, what kind of situation does that put this team into going forward?
Yeah, I think this is actually a conversation that's, yes, it's specific to this Sunday, Myron, but I think it's even more compelling for like what happens going forward. So let's just lay out a couple of the tentacles here. If they don't have him on Sunday, meaning Fitz, or when they don't have Fitz this Sunday, it means Tua's got to go wire to wire. There's no two ways about that, okay? But beyond that, the Dolphins have a decision to make on Ryan Fitzpatrick this offseason. He's a free agent to be. I would expect he'll have suitors, not just the Dolphins himself. And Fitz has been really well traveled, obviously. He's played for like half the NFL. So I don't think that him moving on from the Dolphins is going to be like, I don't think there's an emotional attachment that he has to just one spot that he's like, hey, I'm only playing in Miami or I'm not playing anywhere at all, right? So I would be interested to see what his market is and what the Dolphins are willing to pay to keep him. Because if you've got a guy in Tua that you are confident, let's just flip the script here. Like, what if this offseason the Chargers signed a backup quarterback for a lot of money? That would be a warning sign to you, right? Like, you just had Justin Herbert break the rookie passing touchdown record. Why are you investing? And I'm just using this number arbitrarily. Why are you paying a backup 2 years and $16 million? Why are you doing that if you've got a 22-year-old prodigy-level quarterback in Justin Herbert? Beyond that, the Dolphins, as of right now, have the 3rd overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft. That comes courtesy of the Houston Texans. If they have a top 5 pick, regardless, I shouldn't say regardless, but I'm not trying to fault the Dolphins here, but if they have a 2021 top 5 NFL draft pick, which it certainly looks like they will, do you think they need to have a conversation about drafting a quarterback? And by that, I actually mean very little to do with Tua, just the value of a quarterback on a rookie contract that is an elite prospect. Is there too much value to ignore that conversation?
I don't think you can ignore it. But I think there's a lot that we're going to know here in the coming weeks. Number one is Justin Fields or Zach Wilson or those guys, are they a number 3 kind of level quarterbacks? That's the kind of quarterback you pick in that position. So I think that is probably the number one factor. But if Tua wins and he looks good and he gets this team to the playoffs, there's no conversation to be had. But to your point, if he struggles and you've got Fitzpatrick and you have all these things to figure out, you can never ignore an opportunity to get a guy who might be better than the guy you have. Ask Arizona. Josh Rosen was the dude. He was going to be the guy that came out of that draft, and he was polished and smart. And then it didn't work out. And they got Kyler Murray, and I think a lot of people are obviously happy with that move. So in the NFL, if you're Brian Flores, your quarterback is your future. I mean, that's your job. So you can't ignore it. But Tua can silence all of that. If he plays well, they win, they get into the playoffs. But if you bring Fitzpatrick into a situation where you've paid him a competitive salary, doesn't that set up a competition going into training camp if those are your two quarterbacks, Phil?
Yeah, it definitely does. And as we've learned in the NFL, coaches can say things, and they can be true, by the way, but they can also change rapidly, right? I mean, Jalen Hurts was the backup and still the backup until he was not the backup, right? And going into this upcoming season, I don't care what the Eagles say. I don't care if they tell me Carson Wentz is definitely the guy. I won't believe it until the games begin next year, right? I mean, if someone said to you from the Philadelphia Eagles organization, hey, it's Carson Wentz's job next year, I'd probably laugh at them, right? You mean the guy that led the NFL in sacks taken and turnovers and other negative stats is going to be the guy over the player who at the end of the season at least gave a little bit of life in Jalen Hurts? It's a really fascinating conversation for the Dolphins, and it's fascinating just to think that a backup quarterback, the guy who doesn't play unless your starter is either A, hurt, B, struggling, or you're up by so much at the end of the game that all there is left to do is basically hand the football off as the human victory cigar. The fact that we're talking about a quarterback for a team that is as good as Miami is, it's just sort of an illuminating, interesting conversation. But it's not the only game that matters this week. Do you think that because the Arizona Cardinals and the Rams is actually the only game this week where either team involved in the game, whichever one wins, automatically goes to the playoffs with no help needed whatsoever elsewhere? Yeah. I think there's a lot of pressure on both teams for obvious reasons. 2 weeks ago, the Rams had a 99.9% chance to make the playoffs according to ESPN's FPI playoff predictor. But is it Kyler Murray and the Cardinals and maybe Cliff Kingsbury who has the most pressure on them right now?
Yeah, I mean, Kingsbury for sure. If you look at kind of what he's done or hasn't done with a guy like Kyler Murray. And Murray, early in the season, obviously showed a lot of promise. And I think this is a guy that going forward, you're going to give him more opportunities. The talent is there, what's around him, and what's happening with his head coach. I think Kingsbury is the guy that has yet to prove to me that he's definitely a good head coach at this level. And that was a lot of the problem coming in. There were a lot of doubts about his resume. You weren't a great college coach. Why would you be a great NFL coach? But he had that tie to Kyler Murray. People figured it was sort of a package deal. But is that going to work out? If Kyler Murray and the Cards don't get into the playoffs, you've got to question everything going forward. And we know, Phil, that this is a league that loves to get rid of coaches when they think that coach isn't the right guy for a star quarterback. And I think Kingsbury could definitely be in that situation with Kyler Murray, because what have you really done to change this franchise from the past regime? Like what is Kingsbury's identity as a coach? Like what is he doing that's made everybody go, okay, this is the guy. He's Zach Morris on the sideline, looks the part. Everybody wants the young coordinator who's still in great shape, but can you coach? He hasn't answered that question yet sufficiently.
Well, and a couple other dynamics here is that you mentioned how everybody wants to change coaches and all that after the season. The Cardinals did this 2 years ago, right? They fired Steve Wilkes to hire Cliff Kingsbury. They also drafted Josh Rosen and then pulled the plug a year later. I am not suggesting that Steve Keim, their general manager, is intending to in any way pull the plug on Cliff Kingsbury. I just think this. If they lose on Sunday, the conversation this offseason is not going to be about where did Kyler Murray come up short in his second year in the NFL. Most of the conversation this year about Kyler Murray will probably be about, hey, Kyler's just barely scratching the surface. 2 years into his NFL career, already at least on the outside of the the MVP conversation, one of the most dynamic players in the NFL. It won't be him who's receiving the criticism. It could very well be Cliff Kingsbury that we're talking about a bunch this offseason, because you know what happens when you're the head coach? You take a lot of the responsibility. Again, a reminder, if the Rams or Cardinals win, whichever team wins, they're automatically going to the playoffs. The Rams could still lose and make the playoffs with the Bears also losing to the Green Bay Packers. A huge, huge game. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. At Progressive, they're making things even easier to help you bundle your home and car insurance together so you can save on both. Learn more at Progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Coming up, do we hold Notre Dame to an unfair standard in comparing them to Alabama and Clemson? It's the Dan Batard Show with Field Yates and Myron Medcalf on ESPN Radio.
From Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin.
Tell me why we deserve the opportunity to be mentioned with these dudes, whether we get run out of the building or not.
Right into Greeny with Mike Greenberg.
If you're going to play the position the way they had him play it in Carolina, then you better be ready for an 8-year career.
The opinions, the analysis, the passion. Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin at 6 Eastern, followed by Greeny at 10 Eastern. Coming Tuesday to ESPN Radio.
It is the Dan Batard Show with Stu Gatz on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, and Sirius XM Channel 80, plus ESPN Plus. All guests appear via the Goodyear hotline, and we're presented by Progressive Insurance. It's Field Yates and Myron Medcalf hanging out with you. Happy New Year to you and yours. And a reminder, the college football playoff is here. Kick off your day with a Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. Then stay tuned for the college football playoff semifinals. The Rose Bowl game presented by Capital One, followed by the All-State Sugar Bowl. Coverage begins today at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. And it's time for us to keep this conversation going about college football by spending time with our ESPN college football reporter, David Hale. And, David, the first game today, first of all, Happy New Year to you and yours. Appreciate you making some time for us here on the Le Batard Show. And the first game of the day is, of course, Alabama and Notre Dame. And one thing we've been discussing and wondering is, do we hold Notre Dame to an unfair standard by even bothering comparing them to Alabama and Clemson right now?
Yeah, I think that's probably true of more teams than just Notre Dame, though. The fact of the matter is, if you look at the last 6 years or so of college football, it really is Clemson, Alabama, and everybody else. And occasionally someone from that everybody else tier rises up to be relatively close, or in LSU's case last year, a mile ahead. But that's the exception to the rule. And look, there is a standard held to Notre Dame that I think is somewhat fair and earned over the years, which is since the start of the BCS era, which was going more than 2 decades ago now, that team has come up short in big games and come up short often by a lot. That's a narrative that is hard to get rid of. I would argue this team is much better than any of those previous teams, including the one that played for the national championship against Alabama back in 2012. But I still don't think that it's a team that's particularly close to being on par with Alabama or Clemson right now. I mean, there's a lot of things that Notre Dame does well, and I think they are genuinely one of the 4 best teams in the country. But the problem is we don't really know, I think, enough about Ohio State, but there's a big gap between 1 and 2 and 4 this year, as there has been many years. And there's nothing wrong with being number 4, just they're probably closer to number 5 or 6 than they are to 1 or 2.
Based on that point, David, with things being so uncertain after Alabama and Clemson, what do you expect to happen to expansion talks and that conversation around expansion after today's games?
It's funny because I feel like there's a sort of a process that has seemed to play out at least the last few years, in which leading up to these games, there's a lot of sort of hand-wringing about we need expansion and the system is broken and messed up and we need expansion. And then we play the semifinal games, and at least one, and in some cases both, are blowouts. And then the conversation turns to, well, we don't need expansion. We don't even need 4. Like, these games aren't close. And everything kind of dies down over the offseason, and then it all repeats itself again the next year. I think there are a couple of things that might be different now. One is that we are getting ever closer to a new TV contract for the playoff. And as much as I would like to believe that lots of other on-field factors will come into play, the biggest thing is going to be money, if the money is going to drive expansion. I think, honestly, the first game of the day, the one that's about to kick off here in a little less than a half an hour, is going to tell us a little something, too, because if Cincinnati wins, I think that adds yet another piece to the argument that, like, it's unfair that half of the teams in college football do not have a chance from day one, no matter what they do. And so I think that is a little bit of a push. But what I think doesn't really get talked about much is that more years than not over the last 5, there have been not 1 but 2 Power 5 leagues left out. So the Big 12 and the Pac-12 were left out this year. The Pac-12 has been making a habit of that. Those commissioners have more sway than anybody else outside of the Power Five does. And I think if they're saying, hey, look, it's a problem that our league is getting killed financially because we cannot get a team in the playoff every year. Look, a little bit of that's on them, but I think there will be pressure to say, all right, we're going to put all 5 league champions into a playoff and then have a wild card, or maybe we go to 8 or something like that. But something that makes winning your league paramount. And I don't have a problem with that. I genuinely think that's the best way of doing things. They talk a lot about wanting to make the regular season matter for something. Well, if winning your league matters the most, then the regular season continues to matter above all. And so that's to me, I think, the way to go. I think we are getting closer to that, but as you guys know, everything in college football moves at a glacier's pace. So we're incrementally moving there. I would not expect major changes for 2021 or even 2022.
David, you're right that sometimes what happens, the offseason starts and we start to, our thoughts and opinions and feelings cool off a little bit. Myron and I are dedicated to making this happen. 18 playoffs sometime sooner rather than later. Let's talk about the 4 teams that are playing in the playoff a little bit more. Ohio State feels like the team that has been maybe most disrespected in this process, right? And maybe some of it's fair, maybe some of it's unfair. Notre Dame, it just feels like, hey, Alabama's just really good. It's going to be difficult for anybody to beat Alabama. But Ohio State seemingly has little shot in the eyes of many. There have been questions about whether playing 6 games was enough, whether the Big Ten bending the rules to accommodate Ohio State was fair or unfair. What sort of case can you make for Ohio State pulling off an upset today over Clemson and Trevor Lawrence?
I think you don't have to do anything more than go back to last year's game when they played each other in the semifinal. And, I mean, that was a couple of really narrow calls and in some cases really judgment calls that decided the outcome of that football game. Those were 2 teams that were really closely matched last year in a normal scenario. Back in March and April when we all thought that life would be normal by the fall and we'd be playing college football as expected, Ohio State would have been my pick to win the national championship because they've got that much talent on the roster. But the problem is we have a very small sample size, and within that sample size, we've seen a lot of sort of mixed results and not a lot of times in which Ohio State has been at, quote, full strength on the field all at the same time. It just hasn't happened. So to me, I think you're looking at Clemson coming off of what was clearly their best game of the year against Notre Dame in the ACC championship game. And that's the thought that people have of where Clemson is right now. And you're looking at Ohio State and saying, I don't know. Is Justin Fields, is that thumb healthy? Is he going to be able to throw the ball? What's Chris Olave look like after being in quarantine for 2 weeks? These are good questions. And I don't know the answer. I will say, look, Dabo got a lot of headlines for ranking them 11th in the coaches poll because he thought that they didn't belong with only playing 6 games. And I tend to agree with him that they got a lot of leeway in getting put here. But now that they're here, having only played those 6 games, to me is as much a problem for Ohio State as it was a strength for them because they've not had the time to figure themselves out like Clemson did. If we look at Clemson after that first Notre Dame game, you're looking at a team and thinking much differently about them than you are today. But they were able to come back and play a few more games and have Trevor Lawrence back and healthy. E.J. Williams, their freshman wide receiver, I think is a critical piece of today's matchup. And he was able to kind of play a little bit more games and get to this point where he's, I think, ready to have a breakout. Those types of things you only get by being on the field. And frankly, Ohio State has not been on the field together enough for any of us to really know what to expect. So, look, I think if Ohio State wins it, it is a credit to Ryan Day and that coaching staff and what they were able to do under very difficult circumstances. They certainly have the talent to win it, but the more refined, more established team right now is clearly Clemson.
David Hale, ESPN college football reporter. Enjoy the games today, and Happy New Year to you. Let's enjoy these 4 teams playing in a high-stakes matchup for the next, let's see, what do we have? 12 hours of football ahead of us. Thanks, David.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, who has the most pressure to perform well today? It's a conversation we've been having all morning, and we'll dive into it one more time here on the Batard Show. Plus, we're talking to Master P. Wait, did I just say Master P? That's right. It's the Dan Le Batard Show with Field Yates and Myron Medcalf on ESPN Radio.
From Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin.
Kansas City, New Orleans has a lot of toys, but they all been together. There's all sorts of continuity issues that are going on with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Right into Greeny with Mike Greenberg.
They need to start that thing over again, and you don't start over again around a $38 million quarterback who you have for 1 year.
The opinions, the analysis, the passion. Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin at 6 Eastern, followed by Greeny at 10 Eastern. Coming Tuesday to ESPN Radio.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, Bucket, go boom!
Stugats.
I do like that idea, Goldie. Greedy. I like the idea. I have a friend named Goldie. I called you Goldie.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
It is the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugats on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, and Sirius XM Channel 80 plus ESPN plus. And I figured this out. It's Field Yates and Myron Medcalf. And I've realized something, Myron, is that I am simply playing the role of Stugats adeptly today. I hit you up with Myron Rolle. I called you Byron at one point. I'm just trying to fill the larger-than-life shoes that normally are worn by John Stugats Wiener. I mean, that's really what this comes down to. And you actually have to admire the dedication to the bit, right?
Yeah, you're doing a great job with it.
I appreciate that.
It's been incredible.
I appreciate that. It is January 1st, 2021, which means we've made it. Not just to the new year, but also the college football playoff semifinal, which we're going to discuss in a minute about who's got the most pressure on them. Maybe even make some game picks. But I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. Do you have like a New Year's resolution this year, Byron?
Nothing too crazy. You know, I always want to improve. I just want to be better. I don't believe in like the big write it down on a vision board kind of, people forget about that stuff in a week.
Yeah, well, you're a dad, and like I feel like your kids might like legitimately set New Year's resolutions that you can try to have them aspire to, right?
Yeah.
But like,
be better.
Yeah,
clean your room, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, say your radio co-host name properly, things like that. We don't aim too high around here on the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugats on ESPN Radio. But the college football playoff is here, and kick off your day with the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. Then stay tuned for the college football semifinals. The Rose Bowl game presented by Capital One, followed by the All-State Sugar Bowl. Coverage begins at noon on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. So we're going to get into the college football playoff in just a moment. But before we do, just time to hear from a very special and frequent guest on this program. Actually, I'm not sure if he's ever been on the program before. We had a chance to chat with none other than hip-hop legend, entrepreneur, and potential new owner of Reebok. That's right, Master P.
Time now for Guillermo's epic sound of the day. It is going to be epic.
As an African-American kid growing up in the project and saying that, buying lots of tennis shoes, I grew up wearing Reebok, Nike, Adidas, and to be able to one day say I can acquire a company like that is incredible. It's nothing but God to show you where we come as a culture. Together, we are stronger. Me and Baron Davis, we've been knowing each other a long time, and we was like, you know what? We've been doing all these other deals, multi-million-dollar deals. As you grow and understand financial literacy and understand the deal of making deals, you're like, you know what? This is the next chapter to make a bigger deal. And now we went from multi-million-dollar deals to billion-dollar deals, and this is only one of many. But Reebok is a struggling shoe company, but it's a major shoe brand that has a lot of equity still left in it. And we realized that we can help take Reebok to the next level if it's majority black-owned. And that's our goal, to change the narrative, to put money back in a community that built a brand of this magnitude.
The full conversation with Master P, of course, will be available on the podcast. Go check out the feed. Kind of a cool way to start 2021, right? Like, I kind of feel like it's already trending in the right direction, hanging out with Master P. He's got all kinds of insight, that's for sure. And he is just, the dude never stops. That much is for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to say, make him say, but I didn't do it in the middle of it. I wanted to say that, though, to him directly, just to see if I was doing it the right way.
You know what, though? In your defense,
yes,
you could have potentially, like, you might have peaked too early in 2021 if you made that happen. You know what I mean?
That's true.
Like, you got to save some space to grow for the rest of 2021. So we do have the college football playoff today. It starts at Alabama and Notre Dame. then Ohio State and Clemson. Just one more time here before we get into game picks. Who do you believe is under the most pressure today to win, perform well, lose in respectable fashion? Who you got?
I mean, the team is Notre Dame, and trying to restore the legacy in the name. You can't get beat down again. And then Justin Fields. This is not just about this game for Justin Fields. It's about his future in the NFL, too.
It is, and Justin Fields right now is certainly in the mix to be one of the top 2 players selected in the NFL draft because he's got a lot of opportunities ahead of him. But I also think it's possible that a guy who felt like at one point this season as the no doubt about it number 2 pick in the NFL draft also has a chance to, I don't want to say slide. I feel like that's unfair to a kid. But if he does not perform well tonight, I think the door is open for someone like Zach Wilson of BYU to potentially make his way into the conversation for the number 2 pick in the NFL draft, which will be the New York Jets, by the way. Of course, they would probably trade it under those circumstances. Or Penei Sewell from Oregon or other top-rated prospects. But a big opportunity here for Ohio State and for Justin Fields tonight. So in the final minute of the show, I ask you, Myron, who you got in both of these games?
Definitely Alabama. And I think Alabama covers the spread. And I'm going to pick Clemson. I mean, I think that defense rattles Justin Fields, and they advance to the championship.
Yeah, my heart and basically everything is telling me to pick Alabama and Clemson, obviously. I feel like offering a counterpoint and going with Ohio State, mostly so that if they win, I can have an I told you so moment. My first one of 2021. Is that reason? Is that a good enough justification to pick Ohio State?
Go for it, man.
So even if it's not, I'm going to stick with it. Myron, it's been a lot of fun here today. I hope we get to do this again sometime soon. A good start to 2021. If you ask me. Coming up next year on ESPN Radio, it's the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, followed by the college football semifinals. Cannot wait for the action.
Greeny is coming to your mornings.
The Baltimore Ravens are the team in the AFC that nobody wants to see coming.
Greeny with Mike Greenberg, moving to 10 a.m. Eastern, immediately following Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin, Tuesday on ESPN Radio.
College football.